What a horrible result and what a horrible performance by Eddie Howe's Newcastle. Again, I expected a result of this sort, but a performance of that sort was clearly not expected. Spoke to a couple of Newcastle fans on Twitter who were clearly disappointed with what is going on. And I think we have to blame the manager for this result. Undoubtedly, I think even though they have a depleted squad line, they don't have enough depth due to the injuries that they've sustained. Eddie Howe again limited to his options, had to play a Dan Burns, had to play a Sean Longstaff, and had to come in with a new formation because the 4-3-3 clearly wasn't going to work against Man City. But in my opinion, this formation of a back five also wasn't really going to instill any sort of attacking rhythm. And you could clearly see it. Anthony Gordon again, not a fully fit Anthony Gordon against the likes of Kyle Walker and Ruben Diaz would have never worked, and they were isolated up front. Um, with despite their first 10 minutes of a good off the ball display, I could see their approach in the game was somewhat right, but still, the players weren't giving enough. The midline was a bit of a sus for me, especially Bruno Guimaraes and Sean Longstaff in the first half were caught napping on so many occasions. Um, Pressing high with that front line, and Ortega finding it really easy with those long passes to find Doku on so many occasions, just bypass their first lines of press. And from there on, Man City were totally driving the ball through the middle channels. It really worked for them. Um, and again, Bernardo, Phil Foden, Doku with so much intricate rotation in the inner channels and acting as inward forwards. I think that was a good tactic which Pep brought in this game, and especially pinning Guardiola and Kyle Walker as wide wingers. It really worked for him. They were able to compress Newcastle to an extent where they were not even sure of how should they be pressing from the back, and that's what really led to their loss. I think, especially the two deflected goals which really came in. I know Botman and Burns will be deemed as unlucky in those situations, but what was Joe Willock doing? You have 5 to 8 yards in front of you. There's so much space in front of you. Rather than trying to close Bernardo Silva down, he backpedaled and allowed Bernardo Silva to take a shot. And that resulted in two atrocious goals, which would have never happened in the first place, right? I still feel Newcastle could have pounced on City. They could have utilized the attack, the presence of Isak and Anthony Gordon. Again, I felt he wasn't fully fit, so I don't understand why. First of all, why would he go in with a 5-3-2? Second, why would he not deploy a Miguel Almiron, who's clearly more attacking and more threatening with the pace that he can deliver? Um, so yeah, I think overall, I think Man City again with the creativity that which they brought in, especially playing Newcastle through the middle, like a Newcastle of 2 seasons back when Eddie Howe, in his second season, when Eddie Howe literally made them into a bunch of mentality monsters with the pressing, with the counter pressing, with everything working so well with them, with Joel Linton being there in the center of things. I think if a City would have faced that Newcastle, City would have never had the chance of even driving through the middle channels in this game. But they faced a Newcastle that was clearly more weaker, and it was so easy for them to nullify any sort of threat that they were bringing in, contesting in the duels in the right fashion. And Kovacic acting out to be one of the best midfielders in my opinion next to Rodri. I think Kovacic had a brilliant game, especially with the way he was passing the balls out, the way he was gliding past the Sean Longstaff, who was atrocious in his role. Sean Longstaff again losing the ball on numerous occasions, not positioned in the right channel, not giving in his best effort, and just being so sloppy in possession. Man, Kovacic literally ran that game. He found it so easy to find Jeremy Doku, and with those one-on-ones, even Kovacic was getting near the final third and was short passing to Foden, who had a few takes on the goal. But again, I think the game was played out in a fashion by City that they wanted to exploit Newcastle's weaknesses, and I think to a certain extent, barring what happened in the box, City were running the game, and they had the ultimate control that a team like Pep Guardiola's would want. Um, but again, Haaland getting nullified by Shaw, Fabian Shaw, and Sven Botman on so many occasions. I think Newcastle's Defenders did an all right job. They were okay. They were throughout the game. They were okay. They weren't that composed. Again, a bit effy. The long passes, the rhythm wasn't really working in their favor at all. Um, so yeah, a horrible effort by Newcastle. But let's just quickly get into the lineup and see which player did really well. I felt for Newcastle, Jacob Murphy really showed up in a way. I think Jacob Murphy, even though against the likes of Guardiola and Doku, he had no standing chance altogether. I think Guardiola matched his intensity and he literally did pocket him on a couple of occasions. But Jacob Murphy made a couple of scintillating runs when Guardiola was caught on a higher line. And Jacob Murphy did deliver a couple of crosses, which was Newcastle's best chance at getting back in the game. Um, those crosses in the first half, we had an opportunity with Isaac um, giving a brilliant touch on the ball and almost got the better of Ortega, but Ortega played a really good game with a couple of saves that came his way. Wasn't troubled enough, but still, with those few opportunities, Newcastle could have inflicted a lot of pain. Played 90 minutes, had 17 out of 68% accurate passes. Again, wasn't really that involved in the game because they didn't really enjoy a lot of that possession. They only got to play in a few transitions. 48 touches on the ball and 3 out of 8 accurate passes. Couldn't deliver any good long balls. One, two out of two tackles with a few duels here and there, five defensive actions. So I think overall, Jacob Murphy was average, but he was the better of the entire unit. Fabian Shaw, Botman, again, coming up with a crucial performance here yet again. But like I said, they could have closed down Bernardo Silva in those two sequences, especially Joe Willock doing a tremendous job of retracting, putting in a shift. But still, you're supposed to close the runner down, and he couldn't do it. Again, isolated and attack. Dan Burns, again, a preferred option for Eddie Howe since he was limited to a few options on the bench. I would have never really started this person. If a Livramento would have been fit, I would have preferred him for sure. I think a Livramento could have turned the game around for Newcastle single handedly. He could have provided that intensity from the left, and maybe Pep would have been forced to use Foden and Doku as wide wingers, right? But I think it was so easy for Man City to get on the ball and to, you know, make the best of these options which Newcastle presented. They were so slow on the ball. They were so slow off the ball as well, taking too many touches on the ball. But yeah, man, I think Dan Burns did not really have that good a game. He might have had a couple of recoveries and all that, but still, I felt on the ball in possession, the options presented from the defense to the attack weren't enough. Even they couldn't even thread the situation up front when you had an Isak with Bruno Guimaraes. I think Bruno Guimaraes had a couple of scintillating passes which really crossed City's lines and bypassed them, but then that wasn't enough too. So it was a hot and cold performance from Newcastle with the ball. But if you talk about City, I think Bernardo Silva, man, this guy is such a threat. Bernardo, Foden, Doku, when they occupy those inner channels, those small pockets, they are wanting to take a shot at the keeper. And that's what they were trying to do the most. Even though they tried servicing Holland the best that they could. But again, Newcastle's defense was quite sturdy in a way, and they dissipated any sort of threat, which even Kovacic tried to create with a couple of flicks in the first half when Haaland got past Fabian Shaw. And yeah, man, City was just threatening, were absolutely demolishing. Rodri again coming up with a great performance as usual, ran the tempo through the midfield, owned the midfield, and allowed players like Doku and Foden and Bernardo getting on the ball. Walker in the first half, Guardiola in the first half, like I said, were pinned to the wide lines, which really worked for City because they were able to draw Dan Burns and Murphy's attention, and they could deceive them, and they allowed other players in the midline to surge past in the inner channels, allowing the attackers to create some sort of creativity in that moment. Akanji, Diaz coming up with phenomenal performances. Akanji on so many occasions dissipated the threat coming in from Newcastle's midfield, held on to Guimaraes, Longstaff, Gordon, and Isak was, I mean, nullified too to a certain extent by the likes of Diaz. And the only good opportunity which I saw came in the first half, and the header, which was again delivered by a cross delivered by Dan Murphy, which was headed by Dan Burns, and yeah, that was a good connection too between Dan Burns and Isak. So two crucial chances which could have been converted overall, but they failed to do it. And then you had cameos coming in from the likes of Elliot Anderson, Lewis Hall, Lewis Miley. Again, they brought in a little freshness in the unit, but it wasn't enough for them to thread those passes and to form a creative build-up. They couldn't really get into City's box at all, and whatever opportunities they had, I still think it just wasn't enough. Right. Um, City with an XG of 1.22, which wasn't enough again. Not many chances were created in this game. I want to specifically go on Haaland once. Just want to see how he was dissipated. Um, so he had a header in the 30th minute, which went way too wide, and it wasn't. It had no XG on it, just a 2% chance, and 1% chance in the 45th minute. 52nd second. This shot was phenomenal. I thought Holland, the way he surged, he made that run from the half line and shows that he is really comfortable with the ball when he's surging up front alone. And in that isolated situation too, he was able to take on Fabian Schär and Sven Botman, tried maneuvering past them, but just hushed past the goal. And 64th minute, there was another chance for 4%. So Holland had a couple of half chances, but he wasn't able to really control the ball in the box because Fabian Schär and Sven Botman were able to nullify that situation. So I think again, Holland really did not really have that great a performance, but he never really did anything wrong outside the box. I think he was really immense in that role too, outside the box. Yeah, so overall, I think City are content with the way they played this game. I think they saw it out in the right fashion. They are definitely going in the semifinals, and in the other fixtures, Coventry shocked Wolves, and they won that game. They're in the semifinals too. I think it's going to be Coventry versus whoever wins tomorrow's fixture. Chelsea versus Leicester. Can be Leicester, can be Chelsea. So I think Liverpool or Man United are going to be facing Man City once again in the semi-finals, and it's going to be an intense competition.